Have you ever imagined being pushed out of the home you grew up in by your own family, the house your father left you, but they didn't know you held a secret that could change everything? They thought they'd won, but they were wrong, dead wrong. This is a journey of cold, calculated revenge and raw emotion, where a daughter who seemed powerless would rise to reclaim control, not just of a house, but of her father's legacy. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't served hot or cold. It's served with legal papers and the truth they never saw coming. My name is Samantha Whitmore, Sam to those who knew me before everything changed. At 34, I'd built a life I was proud of as a senior software engineer at Nimbus Systems in Austin, Texas. But no matter how many complex algorithms I solved or how many promotions I earned, nothing compared to the pride I felt when I thought about my father, Richard Whitmore. Dad wasn't a tech mogul or a corporate executive. He was a craftsman in the truest sense of the word, running a small but renowned construction company specializing in historic home restoration. While other kids' parents pushed them toward medicine or law, Dad taught me to appreciate the grain of wood, the weight of a hammer, and the satisfaction of creating something that would outlast us both. Legacy isn't about money, Sam, he'd tell me, his calloused hands sketching renovation plans at our kitchen table. It's about what you protect, what you preserve for those who come after. Our house was his masterpiece, a 1920s craftsman he'd restored board by board, window by window, with his own hands, every carved banister, every restored hardwood floor, every perfectly fitted joint told the story of his dedication. He'd bought it as a shell in 1985 before I was born, and spent 5 years bringing it back to life while living in a trailer on the property. Mom used to joke that he loved that house more than her. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's why their marriage didn't last. I was 7 when my parents divorced. Mom, Caroline, got primary custody, but I spent every weekend and summer with Dad in that craftsman house. Those were the best times, learning to use a lathe in his workshop, helping him match historical paint colors, listening to him explain why you should always respect the original architecture. The house wasn't just where he lived, it was his philosophy made tangible. "This house has good bones," he'd say, running his hand along a doorframe he'd spent weeks restoring. "Just like people, Sam, when something has good bones, you don't tear it down. You honor what's there. You make it stronger." Even after I moved out for college, then grad school, then my career, that house remained my true north. Every Christmas, every birthday, every success or failure brought me back to those oak floors and leaded glass windows. Dad would make his famous chili. We'd sit on the wraparound porch he'd rebuilt himself, and everything would feel right with the world. The last time I saw him healthy was a Sunday in March. We were planning to restore the detached garage into a proper workshop, not just for him, but for both of us. "This will be our project," he said, showing me the blueprints he'd drawn. "Something we build together." 3 days later, a massive heart attack took him at his workbench. Surrounded by his tools and the smell of sawdust, the paramedics said he was gone before he hit the floor. At least he died in his element, people said, as if that made it better. As if that made it bearable. The house felt different without him, like a church without hymns, but it was still his, still ours. In my grief, I foolishly believed it always would be. I didn't yet know that some people see a grieving widow not as someone to protect, but as an opportunity to exploit. I didn't yet know about Mark Reynolds. Mom started attending a grief support group at First Methodist Church 6 weeks after Dad's funeral. I encouraged it. She seemed lost without him. Despite their divorce 15 years earlier, they'd remained friends, and his death hit her harder than either of us expected. "I met someone," she told me over coffee 4 months later. Her eyes had a brightness I hadn't seen since before Dad died. "His name is Mark Reynolds. He lost his wife 2 years ago. He understands what I'm going through." I wanted to be happy for her. At 61, she deserved companionship, someone to share her golden years with. When I finally met Mark, he seemed decent enough. Tall, gray-haired, with the kind of practiced charm that comes from years in sales. He brought her flowers, opened doors, laughed at her stories. He talked about his late wife with what seemed like genuine emotion. I was in medical equipment sales for 30 years, he told me over dinner at Mom's apartment. Retired early when Jennifer got sick. Spent every moment with her until the end. His voice caught just enough to seem authentic. The life insurance helped, but money doesn't fill the emptiness, you know? I should have paid more attention to how quickly he steered conversations toward Dad's house. Caroline tells me your father was quite the craftsman. That house must be worth a fortune now, with the Austin market being what it is. It's not for sale, I said firmly. Of course not, he replied smoothly. Family legacy. I completely understand. But he didn't understand. How could he? He'd never built anything with his own hands. Never spent years breathing life back into something others had abandoned. To him, the house was just square footage and market value. Things moved fast after that. Too fast. Within 6 months of meeting, Mark was spending most nights at Mom's apartment. His adult children started appearing at family dinners. Evan, 29, unemployed, and perpetually between opportunities, and Lily, 27, who called herself an influencer but seemed to influence nothing but her credit card debt. Mom's finally happy again, Lily gushed, though she'd known my mother for all of 3 weeks. It's like fate brought them together. Evan was less subtle. This house situation must be complicated, he said during Thanksgiving dinner at Mom's place. I mean, with your dad gone, your mom technically should get half of everything, right? That's not how divorce works, I said coldly. Still, he pressed. Seems unfair that she's stuck in that tiny apartment while that big house sits there with just memories. The proposal came on Christmas Eve. Mark got down on one knee in front of the entire extended family, pulling out a ring that looked suspiciously similar to the one his late wife wore in the photos he'd shown us. Mom said yes through tears, and everyone applauded except me. We want to start fresh, Mom announced at New Year's dinner. Mark's going to move in with me for now, but she looked at me with a mixture of hope and guilt. We were thinking maybe we could all move into Dad's house, make it a real family home again. My stomach dropped. Mom, that house? I know it's technically yours, she interrupted. But I lived there too once. I helped choose those kitchen cabinets. I planted that garden. Don't I have some claim to it? And with Mark's children visiting, we need the space. Mark's hand covered hers. We're not asking for ownership. Sam, just to live there, to be a family. Your mother deserves to be in a proper home, don't you think? The practiced reasonableness of his tone, the calculated emotional manipulation, I saw it all clearly. But Mom's eyes were pleading, and 30 years of being her daughter overwhelmed my instincts. Just to live there, I repeated slowly. As a family. Exactly, Mark smiled, but his eyes were already calculating square footage. I agreed, against every instinct screaming in my head. Dad would have wanted Mom to be happy. I told myself he would have wanted the house full of life again. I didn't yet know that some life is actually decay in disguise, eating away at foundations until nothing remains but hollow spaces where something precious once stood. The invasion started slowly, almost imperceptibly. First, it was just Mark's golf clubs in Dad's workshop. Then Evan's gym equipment appeared in the corner where Dad kept his restored vintage tools. Just temporary, Mark assured me when I visited one Saturday, until we figure out the best arrangement. But temporary became permanent, and arrangement became takeover. Within 3 months, Dad's workshop, his sanctuary where he'd spent thousands of hours crafting miracles from wood, had been transformed into Evan's personal gym. The workbench where Dad died was shoved against the wall, covered with protein powder containers and sweaty towels. The pegboard that once held his carefully organized tools now displayed resistance bands and weight belts. This space was just sitting here unused, Evan said when he caught me staring at the transformation. Seems like a waste to keep it as some kind of shrine. It's not a shrine, it's a workshop. He laughed. Come on, Sam. You live across town. When were you ever going to use this stuff? Lily had claimed Dad's study as her content creation studio. The built-in bookcases he'd crafted by hand were stripped of his books on architecture and woodworking, replaced with ring lights and makeup palettes. She'd painted one wall pink, painted over the original wood paneling Dad had spent weeks restoring. "It's just paint," she said when I confronted her. "It's not like I tore anything down." But she had torn something down. She'd torn down 40 years of careful preservation with a few coats of bubblegum pink. The selling started next. I arrived one Sunday to find Mark loading Dad's vintage tool collection into his truck. "Found a buyer online," he explained casually. "These things were just collecting dust. The money can go toward the renovation." "What renovation?" "Oh, Caroline didn't tell you? We're modernizing the place. Open concept. Very trendy." I watched him carry away Dad's 1940 Stanley planes, his hand-forged chisels. The miter saw his own father had given him. Each tool was a piece of history, carefully maintained and cherished. To Mark, they were just items with resale value. Mom had changed too. The grief support group became less about healing and more about Mark's influence. She started parroting his phrases. "We need to move forward, not backward. The past is past." "Your father would want us to be practical." "No." I wanted to scream. "Dad would want you to preserve what he built. He'd want you to understand that some things matter more than market value." The final betrayal came on a Thursday evening. I'd stopped by after work to check on the house, using my key to enter through the side door as always. I found them in the living room. Mark, Mom, Evan, and Lily, surrounded by architectural drawings and contractor estimates. "Sam," Mom startled. "We weren't expecting you." "Clearly." I looked at the plans spread across Dad's restored coffee table. They showed walls knocked down, the kitchen gutted, the original hardwood floors replaced with laminate. "We need to talk about your room," Mark said, not bothering with pleasantries. "My room?" "The master bedroom. Caroline and I need it for ourselves. It doesn't make sense for you to keep a room here when you have your own place." I stared at him, then at Mom. "That's been my room since I was 7. "Sweetheart," Mom said softly, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "You're 34. You don't need a childhood bedroom anymore." "It's not about need." "Actually, it is," Mark interrupted. "We need the space for Lily's things. She's moving in permanently, and with the renovation costs, we might need to rent out the garage apartment for extra income." The garage apartment. The space Dad and I were going to convert together. Our last planned project. "I think," I said slowly, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me, "you've forgotten whose house this is." Mark's expression hardened. "Your mother has rights here too, morally, if not legally. We're a family now. Sam, maybe it's time you accepted that and stopped clinging to the past." Mom finally looked at me, and in her eyes I saw it. She'd chosen him, chosen his vision of the future over Dad's legacy, chosen his family over her daughter's connection to this place. "Pack your things," Mark said with casual authority. "We need the room by Monday." I left that night with a box of personal items and a heart full of rage. They thought they'd won, thought they'd successfully pushed out the only person who truly understood what this house meant. They had no idea what was coming. The law office of Harrington and Associates occupied a restored Victorian in downtown Austin, the kind of meticulous preservation Dad would have admired. Thomas Harrington had been Dad's friend for 20 years and handled all his legal affairs. I'd called him the morning after being kicked out, my voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "Sam, dear God," Thomas said when I finished explaining. "They did what to the workshop?" "That's not why I'm here," I said. "I need to know about Dad's will, the real will." Thomas leaned back in his leather chair, a small smile playing at his lips. "I wondered when you'd come asking. Your father was very specific about when I should reveal certain information. Only if you came to me directly. Only if you asked." He pulled out a file thicker than I expected. "Your father was a smarter man than people gave him credit for. He saw this coming. Sam, maybe not the specifics, but the possibility." My hands trembled as I read through the documents. The house, the entire property was mine, not Mom's, not jointly owned, but completely and solely in my name. Dad had restructured everything after the divorce, ensuring Mom had no legal claim whatsoever. "There's more," Thomas said, sliding another document across the desk. "Are you familiar with the Whitmore Family Trust?" I shook my head. "Your father established it 5 years ago. He moved most of his liquid assets into it. The sale of his business, his investments, life insurance payout, it's all there. Sam, $1.2 million, designated specifically for the preservation and maintenance of the house." I stared at the numbers, unable to process them. Dad had this kind of money? He lived simply, invested wisely, and that business was worth more than he ever let on. But here's the beautiful part. Thomas pointed to a specific clause. "The trust can only be accessed by you, and only for purposes related to the property. Your mother has no claim to it, neither does her new husband. They don't know about any of this? Your father made sure of that. The will they saw after his death was a simplified version. Personal effects, some cash accounts. The real estate transfer was handled quietly through my office. As far as public records show, the house ownership is ambiguous. But legally?" He tapped the deed. "It's yours, free and clear." I thought about Mark's renovation plans, Mom's betrayal, the workshop turned into a gym. Why didn't Dad tell me? "He left you a letter, said to give it to you only if you came seeking the truth." The envelope was cream-colored, Dad's careful handwriting across the front. "For Sam, when she's ready to fight." Inside, his familiar script. "My dearest Sam, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and someone is trying to take what we built together. I knew your mother might remarry. She deserves happiness. But I also knew she's easily influenced by strong personalities. The house isn't just property, sweetheart. It's our family's legacy. Built with these hands, preserved with love. I've given you the tools to protect it, just as I taught you to use actual tools in that workshop. You'll feel guilty. You'll second-guess yourself. People will call you selfish. But remember what I always told you. Legacy isn't about money. It's about what you protect. The trust money is there to help you fight. The house is yours to preserve. Don't let anyone, not even your mother, take that away. She has her own resources, her own path. This is yours. Be strong, my girl. Be smart. And when the dust settles, make that workshop sing again. All my love, Dad." I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I wiped them away and looked at Thomas. "They're demolishing the interior, selling his tools. They've already started construction without permits, without my permission." Thomas's smile turned predatory, reminding me why Dad trusted him. "Oh, Sam, they've handed us everything we need. Destruction of property, illegal construction, theft. That's just the beginning. I don't want to hurt my mother." "You're not hurting her. You're protecting what's yours. There's a difference." He pulled out another file. I took the liberty of researching Mr. Reynolds. Interesting pattern. 3 previous marriages, all to widows, all ended with him somehow profiting from real estate transactions. My blood ran cold. He's done this before? Never provably illegal, but certainly unethical. Your mother is his 4th attempt, and it seems he's gotten bolder. I stood up, gathering the documents. How long before I can act? How long are you willing to let them set their own trap? Every unauthorized change, every shady deal involving your father's property, it all counts as proof. Let them stay confident. Sam, then we'll show them exactly what real defeat looks like. I left that office transformed. They thought they'd pushed out a weak daughter clinging to memories. They had no idea they'd just awakened someone with the legal power, financial resources, and cold fury to destroy everything they'd schemed for. The first strike came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks after I'd discovered the truth. Mark had hired a contractor crew to tear down the wall between the living room and dining room. Dad's carefully restored archway with original 1920s molding. I watched from my car as the workers arrived with sledgehammers. At 8:47 a.m., 3 official vehicles pulled up. Austin Heritage Foundation, the City Historic Preservation Office, and a private structural assessment team I'd hired The lead inspector, Margaret Chen, no relation despite the name, was a woman who took historical preservation as seriously as Dad had. "Stop all work immediately," she commanded, her voice cutting through the sound of power tools. "This property is under historical review." Mark came storming out, his face red. "What the hell is this? We have every right to renovate our home." "Your home?" Margaret raised an eyebrow, consulting her clipboard. "According to our records, this property belongs to Samantha Whitmore. Are you Samantha Whitmore?" "My wife lives here. We're a family." "That's not how property law works, Mr. Reynolds, Mark Reynolds, and I don't care about your review. This is private property." Margaret smiled coldly. "Actually, Mr. Reynolds, this house was added to the Registry of Historic Places 3 days ago. Any structural modifications now require approval from the Heritage Committee. The application was filed by the owner, Ms. Whitmore." I'd spent hours documenting every original feature, every hand-carved detail, every piece of Dad's restoration work. The house qualified easily. It was a textbook example of preserved craftsman architecture. Mark's contractor, a burly man named Jake, stepped forward. "Look, lady, we have a signed contract and permits." "What permits?" Margaret asked. "The city has no record of any permits for this address." That's when Mark saw me, standing by the Heritage Foundation van. His face went from red to purple. "You vindictive little—" "Careful. Mr. Reynolds," Thomas Harrington said, appearing beside me with his briefcase. "Threats against my client will only strengthen our case." "What case?" Thomas handed him a thick envelope. "Destruction of property, theft, fraud, and illegal construction. Ms. Whitmore is seeking immediate cessation of all work, restoration of damaged areas, and compensation for items illegally sold from the premises." Mom appeared in the doorway, still in her robe. "Sam? What's happening?" "I'm protecting Dad's house, Mom, like he asked me to. This is our home now." "No," I said firmly. "It's my house. Your guests. Guests who've destroyed historical architecture, sold family heirlooms without permission, and started illegal construction." The contractors were already packing up, Jake muttering about not getting paid for this mess. Margaret's team moved through the house, documenting every change, every piece of damage. Their cameras captured Lily's pink wall, the gutted workshop, the demolished archway. "You can't do this," Mark snarled, stepping toward me. Thomas moved between us. "Mr. Reynolds, I'd advise you to contact your lawyer. Also, you should know that we've filed a lien against any future work on this property. Any contractor who proceeds without proper authorization will face legal action." Evan came out, still in his workout clothes. "This is insane. We live here." "For now," I said calmly, "but that's going to change if you don't start respecting this house and its history." Margaret emerged from inside, her face grim. "Ms. Whitmore, the damage is extensive. The pink paint over original wood paneling alone is a violation worth $30,000 in fines. The demolished archway? That's criminal destruction of historical property." $30,000? Mom gasped. "Per violation," Margaret clarified. "I count at least 7 major infractions." Mark's face had gone pale. "You're bluffing." I pulled out my phone and showed him photos I'd taken over the past weeks. Him loading Dad's tools into his truck. Receipts I'd found online where he'd sold them. Screenshots of his contractor's social media bragging about the major teardown they were doing. "Every tool you sold belonged to me. Every modification you made was to my property. Every lie you told is documented." "Sam, please," Mom begged. "We can work this out as a family." "We could have," I agreed. "If you hadn't chosen him over Dad's legacy, if you hadn't let them destroy everything Dad built." Thomas cleared his throat. "Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Reynolds, you have 48 hours to halt all renovation activities and provide a full accounting of all items removed from the property. After that, criminal charges will be filed." As the official vehicles pulled away, leaving Mark and his family stunned on the lawn, I felt Dad's presence. Not approval exactly. He was never vindictive, but understanding. Sometimes protecting what matters means being ruthless with those who would destroy it. "This isn't over," Mark hissed at me. "You're right," I replied. "It's just beginning." The family intervention was scheduled for Sunday after church. Mom had mobilized everyone, her sister Patricia from Houston, cousins I hadn't seen in years, neighbors who remembered Dad, even Pastor Williams from First Methodist. They gathered in the living room of my childhood home like a tribunal, with Mark playing the role of concerned stepfather and Mom the heartbroken mother. I arrived alone. Despite Thomas offering to accompany me, this was something I needed to face myself. "Sam, thank you for coming," Pastor Williams began, his voice dripping with practiced compassion. "We're all here because we love you and we're concerned about this conflict." "There's no conflict," I said, taking Dad's old chair, the one Mark had been using. "There's simply the law." Aunt Patricia jumped in. "Sweetie, your mother deserves to be happy after everything she's been through." "Everything she's been through?" I couldn't help but laugh. "She divorced Dad 15 years ago. She got the settlement she wanted. Dad's death doesn't retroactively change that." "But she's your mother," Cousin Janet chimed in. "Family helps family." "Interesting definition of help," I said, pulling out my tablet. "Let me show you how Mark's family has been helping." I swiped through photos. The destroyed workshop, the painted-over wood paneling, the demolished archway. This is what they did to Dad's life's work in just 3 months. The room shifted uncomfortably. Some of the neighbors who'd known Dad looked genuinely upset. "That's just renovation," Mark said smoothly, updating an old house for modern living. "Without permits, without permission, without the legal right to do so." Lily chose that moment to make her entrance, one hand on her slightly rounded belly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted everyone to know. Mark and Caroline are going to be grandparents. We're raising our family here, in this house." The room erupted in congratulations. Mom teared up, reaching for Lily's hand. It was perfectly orchestrated emotional manipulation. "Congratulations," I said flatly. "I'm sure you'll find a lovely place to raise your child. It won't be here." The room went silent. "Sam," Mom gasped, "you would throw out a pregnant woman?" "I'm not throwing out anyone. I'm reclaiming my property from people who've destroyed it and stolen from it." Pastor Williams leaned forward. "Sam, the Bible tells us about forgiveness, about honoring our parents. It also says, 'Thou shalt not steal,'" I interrupted. "Or does that not apply to Mark selling my father's tools? His family destroying historical architecture? Here." I pulled out a printed screenshot. "This is Mark's eBay account. He sold over $15,000 worth of Dad's tools. Tools that belonged to me." Mark's jaw tightened. "Those were gathering dust." "They were mine to let gather dust if I chose." Evan stood up aggressively. "You're just a selfish, greedy—" "Sit down, Evan," I said coldly. "Before I also mention the marijuana plants you're growing in the garage apartment, yes, I know about those too." He sat down quickly, face pale. Mom was crying now. Real tears. "Sam, please, I love Mark. We're happy. Can't you just let us be happy?" For a moment, I almost broke. This was my mother, the woman who'd raised me, who'd bandaged my knees and attended every school play. But then I remembered Dad's letter. She has her own resources, her own path. "Mom," I said gently, "you can be happy. You can be with Mark. You just can't do it in Dad's house while destroying everything he built. You have your apartment. You have your retirement savings. You have choices." "But this is our home now." "No, it's not. It never was. You've been guests who abused their welcome." Janet's husband, Robert, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "Actually, if Sam owns the house legally, they really don't have any right to be there without her permission." "Robert," Janet hissed. "What? I'm a realtor. I know property law. Mark, did you ever get anything in writing? Any rental agreement? Anything?" Mark's silence was answer enough. Pastor Williams tried one more time. Sam, what would your father want? I stood up, pulling out Dad's letter. I know exactly what he wanted because he wrote it down. I read it aloud, every word, ending with, "Don't let anyone, not even your mother, take that away." The room was silent except for Mom's quiet crying. "You have a choice," I said, looking directly at her. "You can stay with me, just you, while Mark finds other arrangements, or you can leave with him, but either way, he and his children are done destroying Dad's legacy." "You're breaking up our family," Lily protested, hands still on her belly. "No, I'm saving mine." I walked to the door, then turned back. "You have 30 days. Thomas Harrington will be in touch with the formal eviction notice. And Mark, every item you sold better be accounted for, or the criminal charges will proceed." As I left, I heard Aunt Patricia whisper, "Richard always was too soft on that girl." No, Aunt Patricia. He was exactly hard enough to make sure I could stand up when it mattered most. The eviction notice was served on a Wednesday morning by a professional process server, with Thomas Harrington and 2 witnesses present. I watched from across the street as Mark signed for it, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally, calculation. Within an hour, he was at my apartment building, somehow having found my address. Security stopped him in the lobby, but I could hear him shouting from my window 12 floors up. I called Thomas immediately. "He's escalating," Thomas said. "Good. Desperate people make mistakes." He was right. Over the next 2 weeks, Mark made several critical errors. First, he tried to quick sell some of the remaining furniture, pieces Dad had restored, through a local dealer. I had injunctions ready within hours. Then he attempted to take out a home equity loan against the property, telling the bank he was the owner. The fraud charges practically wrote themselves. But the real victory came from an unexpected source. Dad's old business partner, George Kimball, who called me after hearing about the situation through the contractor grapevine. "Sam, you need to know something about those tools Mark sold," George said. "3 of them were on loan to your dad from the Heritage Tool Museum. They're worth about $50,000 and they're considered stolen property now. Grand theft, a felony. I hired a private security firm to monitor the house 24 hours a day, documenting everything. They caught Evan trying to remove the restored Victorian doorknobs at 2 a.m. They filmed Lily staging photos for her social media, claiming she was being made homeless while pregnant, without mentioning the actual circumstances. The response to Lily's posts was not what she expected. Several comments pointed out the visible damage to historical architecture in her background. One local historian wrote a scathing blog post about Instagram influencers who destroy heritage homes. It went viral in Austin social media circles. Mark tried one last power play. He scheduled an estate sale for the following Saturday, advertising it as "Everything Must Go, Historical Austin Home Contents." He was trying to empty the house before the eviction deadline. Thomas and I arrived Friday night with a restraining order and a police escort. The officer, a veteran named Rodriguez, who knew Dad from community events, looked disgusted as he reviewed the situation. "Your father restored my mother's porch," he told me quietly. "He was a good man. He gestured at Mark, who was arguing with Thomas. "This is shameful." We padlocked every door, changed every lock. The security team was given strict orders. No one enters without my written permission. Saturday morning, dozens of estate sale shoppers showed up to find notices posted everywhere. Sale canceled. Due to legal action, any items purchased from this address may be subject to recovery as stolen property. Mark stood in the driveway, raging at the security guards, while potential buyers awkwardly dispersed. One antique dealer I recognized approached me. "Ms. Whitmore, I bought some tools from Mr. Reynolds last month. I had no idea they were your father's. I'd like to return them." By noon, 3 other buyers had contacted Thomas about returning items. The community was choosing sides, and it wasn't Mark's. The criminal charges were filed Monday morning: grand theft for the museum tools, fraud for the loan attempt, destruction of historical property. The Austin paper ran a story. Stepfather charged in heritage home scandal. Mom finally called me that evening. Her voice was hollow, defeated. "He's leaving," she said simply. "His children too. They found an apartment in San Antonio." "And you?" A long pause. "I don't know who I am anymore. Sam, I let him convince me that your father's legacy was just stuff, that moving forward meant erasing the past. The past is what shapes us. Mom, Dad knew that. I need time to think, to figure out how I became someone who would betray my own daughter." "You can stay in the house," I said, surprising myself. "Just you, while you figure things out." "After everything?" "You're still my mother, and Dad would want me to give you a chance, one chance." She was crying again, but these tears sounded different, cleaner somehow. That night, I stood in Dad's workshop with the security guard, surveying the damage. The workbench was scarred, the tool wall empty, the floor stained with protein shake spills. But the bones were still good, just like Dad always said. "You planning to restore it?" the guard asked. "Every board," I promised. "Every detail. But first, we're going to watch them leave." The eviction date was set. The charges were filed. The community knew the truth. Mark Reynolds thought he could steal my father's legacy. But he was about to learn that some daughters inherit more than houses. They inherit the strength to protect what matters. Moving day arrived gray and drizzly, fitting weather for an ending that felt more like an amputation than a victory. I stood in Dad's workshop, my workshop now, watching through the window as Mark and his children loaded a rental truck. The security team documented every item, ensuring nothing belonging to the house left with them. Evan carried his gym equipment, head down, avoiding eye contact with the neighbors who'd gathered to watch. Lily made several trips, her pregnancy now more visible, playing victim to the last with dramatic sighs and carefully orchestrated stumbles. But no one rushed to help. The community had made its judgment. Mark supervised with rigid shoulders and clenched fists. When he saw me watching, he started toward the workshop, but Thomas Harrington stepped out of his car, shaking his head slowly. Mark stopped, spat on the driveway, Dad's carefully maintained driveway, and returned to the truck. Mom stood on the porch, a ghost of herself. She'd aged years in weeks, the reality of Mark's true nature having shattered something fundamental in her. When Lily approached her for what looked like a goodbye hug, Mom stepped back, shaking her head. That small rejection seemed to break Lily's performance, and for a moment, I saw real confusion on her face. Perhaps she'd actually believed her own fiction about being family. By noon, they were gone. The truck pulled away without fanfare, without the dramatic confrontation Mark probably wanted. Just a sad, quiet exit from a house that had never wanted them. I spent the next 6 months restoring everything. The trust fund Dad left made it possible to hire true craftsmen, people who understood what we were trying to preserve. The pink paint was carefully removed from the study's wood paneling. The demolished archway was rebuilt using period-appropriate techniques and salvaged materials. The workshop, that took the most time, but it was also the most important. I found some of Dad's tools at antique shops around Texas, bought them back at 3 times what Mark had sold them for. Others were donated back by buyers who learned the story. The museum pieces were recovered through legal action. Tool by tool, board by board, we brought it back. Mom helped, surprisingly. She moved into the garage apartment temporarily, spending her days researching historical paint colors and original architectural details. It became her penance, her way of asking forgiveness without words. We didn't talk much at first, but slowly, working side by side in the garden Dad had planned, something began to heal. I got an email from Mark's ex-wife. She told me one autumn afternoon, both of us covered in soil from planting heritage roses. The second one, she warned me this would happen, said he did the same thing to her mother's estate. "Why didn't she warn you earlier?" "She tried. I didn't want to listen. I thought I was special, different." Mom laughed bitterly. The oldest delusion in the book. The criminal trials were swift. Mark pled guilty to theft charges to avoid jail time. Receiving probation and restitution orders he'll be paying for years. The fraud charges were dropped in exchange for his agreement never to contact us again. Evan got community service for the marijuana cultivation. Lily disappeared into the vast landscape of failed influencers, her last post showing her moving in with her mother in Florida. A year after that horrible eviction scene, I held the grand reopening of Dad's workshop, not as a gym or content studio, but as a working space for craftspeople learning traditional restoration techniques. The Whitmore Workshop for Heritage Crafts, funded by the Trust, offering free classes to anyone willing to learn the old ways. George Kimball taught the first class, showing young apprentices how to use the hand planes Dad had cherished. Mom served coffee and her famous cinnamon rolls, the same ones she used to make when my parents were still married, when we were still whole in a different way. Standing in that space, watching new hands learn old skills, I finally understood what Dad meant about legacy. It wasn't the house itself, or even the tools. It was the knowledge, the respect for craft, the understanding that some things are worth preserving not because they're valuable, but because they're irreplaceable. Mom still lives in the garage apartment. We have Sunday dinners in the main house, just the two of us, slowly rebuilding what Mark tried to destroy. She's dating again, a retired professor who appreciates architecture and has never once asked about property values. Last week, I found a note Dad had hidden in the workbench, probably years ago. Sam, if you're reading this, you're probably fixing something I broke. Remember, it's not about perfection, it's about preservation. Keep building. Love, Dad. I'm keeping my promise. Dad, the workshop sings again, just like you wanted. And the house stands strong, bones good, legacy intact. Mark thought he could take it all, but he never understood the most important truth. You can't steal what's built with love, protected by law, and defended by someone who learned from the best. The house isn't just mine now. It belongs to everyone who understands that some things matter more than money, that heritage isn't about the past, but about what we choose to carry forward. And that's exactly what Dad would have wanted. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Your own experiences and perspectives mean everything to this community we're building together.